The transmission began with static, the kind that prickled like an itch at the back of Evelyn Cross's mind. She sat in her quarters aboard the USS Resolute, scrolling through reports, when the ship's AI interrupted. "Urgent broadcast from Frontier Prime," the AI announced. Evelyn straightened, her fingers pausing mid-swipe. "Put it through." The screen flared to life, and there he was, General Stephen Grant, bound to an alien pyre, surrounded by sneering Imperial soldiers. His uniform was tattered, his face bruised but unyielding. "Humans are an infestation," a cold voice proclaimed in accented English. The speaker, a hulking alien adorned in ornate silver armor, was unmistakable: Archduke Kael'zar, the Empire's war minister. Evelyn's heart clenched as the scene unfolded. Grant stood tall, defiant even as flames licked at the base of the pyre. "You think this will scare them?" Grant growled, his voice hoarse but steady. His eyes burned with something far stronger than fear: contempt. "Humans don't break. You'll learn that soon enough." The fire surged, consuming him as he shouted his final words: "Tell Earth, no mercy." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. Evelyn stared at the blank screen, her chest heaving. For a moment she was frozen, her thoughts a whirlwind of anger, grief, and disbelief. Then the ship's intercom crackled. "Commander Cross, the President is about to speak." Evelyn rose, her movements mechanical, and made her way to the war room. The air was thick with tension as her officers gathered around the central console, eyes glued to the broadcast. President Archer stood at the podium, his expression a mask of grim determination. Behind him, the stars and stripes hung heavily, its edges shimmering in the light of the chamber. "Today," Archer began, his voice steady but weighted with emotion, "we witnessed an act of barbarity unparalleled in the history of the galaxy. General Grant, a man of peace, was executed in cold blood. The Galactic Empire believes this act will break our resolve." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "They are wrong." The room seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn felt the heat of her own anger radiating off her skin. "We will not be cowed by cruelty," Archer continued. "The United States, and all of humanity, will stand united. Today, we declare total war on the Galactic Empire. We will fight for every colony, every citizen, every inch of our sovereignty. We will not rest until justice is served." The broadcast ended, replaced by the crest of the United Earth Coalition. Silence reigned in the war room until Evelyn's voice cut through like a blade. "Everyone to your stations. We've got work to do." Her officers dispersed without a word, their faces hardened with resolve. Evelyn stayed behind, staring at the map of contested space projected on the table. Later that evening, Evelyn stood on the bridge, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The USS Resolute hummed with activity, its crew moving with a practiced urgency. She watched them for a moment, her heart swelling with pride. They were her people, loyal, skilled, and unshakable. "Commander," said Lieutenant Harper, her communications officer, snapping her out of her thoughts. "We've received new intelligence from Frontier Prime. You'll want to see this." On screen. The map of the sector shifted, zooming in on the contested border near Frontier Prime. Harper explained as Evelyn studied the data. "We've intercepted Imperial chatter indicating they're massing a fleet here," Harper said, highlighting a staging ground near a dwarf star. "They're planning to strike Frontier Prime within the week." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Estimated fleet size? At least 30 capital ships. Several carriers, destroyers, and an unknown number of support vessels. Casualty projections if they reach Frontier Prime?" Harper hesitated. "High. The colony's defenses won't hold for long." Evelyn leaned on the console, her mind racing. This wasn't just an act of war. It was the beginning of an extermination campaign. She had to act quickly. "Harper, get me fleet command," she ordered. Moments later, Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen, his expression as grim as hers. "Commander Cross, I assume you've seen the intelligence?" "I have," Evelyn replied. "Permission to launch a preemptive strike on the Imperial staging ground." Hayes frowned. A bold move. You'll be outnumbered and deep in hostile territory. I know, she said firmly. But if we let them make the first move, Frontier Prime will fall. We need to hit them hard and fast, while they're still vulnerable. Hayes studied her for a long moment before nodding. You have my authorization. Good hunting, Commander. Evelyn ended the call and turned to her crew. All hands prepare for combat. We move in 6 hours. The hours passed in a blur of preparation. Evelyn oversaw the loading of weapons, the briefing of officers, and the calibration of the ship's systems. She worked tirelessly, refusing to let herself dwell on the image of Grant's execution that haunted her thoughts. Finally, the Resolute was ready. Evelyn stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen as the countdown to departure ticked away. Helm, she said, her voice steady. Plot a course to the Imperial staging ground. Engage warp drive on my mark. Yes, Commander. The ship shuddered as the warp engines roared to life. Evelyn gripped the edge of the console, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Mark! The stars stretched into streaks of light as the Resolute leapt into hyperspace. Evelyn allowed herself a moment to breathe, her mind already turning to the battle ahead. She would avenge Grant. She would protect her people. And she would show the Galactic Empire exactly what humanity was capable of. The USS Resolute dropped out of warp with a lurch, its engines humming as the ship's sensors adjusted to the gravity well of the dwarf star. The staging ground loomed ahead, a vast void bristling with Imperial ships. Evelyn Cross stood on the bridge, her expression carved from stone. Enemy fleet in sight, Lieutenant Harper reported, his voice taut. The viewscreen flickered, bringing the Imperial Armada into sharp focus. Rows of capital ships drifted in formation, their sleek, predatory designs glowing faintly against the starlight. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. How many? 37 confirmed, Commander, Harper replied. Carrier-class, destroyers, and smaller escort ships. They're holding position near that asteroid field. Perfect, Evelyn muttered, her lips curving into a grim smile. They're clustered. That'll make this easier. The bridge was silent, every officer focused on their station. Evelyn stepped forward, her hands gripping the edge of the console. Open a channel to the fleet. The communications officer nodded, and moments later, her voice carried across the Allied ships. This is Commander Cross. You all know why we're here. The Empire thinks they can intimidate us. They think we'll falter. But we're not just fighting for our colonies or our pride, we're fighting for every human life they threaten to extinguish. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Today, we remind them why humanity survived when the odds were against us. We're going to hit them hard, hit them fast, and leave them reeling. No hesitation, no mercy. Let's show them what it means to be human. Cross out. The channel closed, and Evelyn turned to her tactical officer, Commander Lin. Status of our EMP payloads? Charged and ready, Lin replied. We'll only get one shot before they adapt. One is all we need, Evelyn said. Harper, position us behind that asteroid cluster. I want to stay out of their sensor range until we're ready. The Resolute glided into position, its engines operating at minimum output to avoid detection. The tension on the bridge was palpable, but Evelyn's voice cut through it like a blade. Lin, target the center of their formation. Harper, on my mark, transmit a decoy signal to make it look like we're coming from the opposite flank. Yes, Commander, Harper said, his fingers flying over the console. The seconds dragged as the Imperial fleet drifted, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the asteroid field. Evelyn's knuckles whitened as she clenched the railing. She could feel the weight of every life on her ship pressing down on her shoulders, but she pushed the thought aside. Decoy signal ready, Harper said. EMP payloads locked on, Lin confirmed. Evelyn inhaled deeply. Fire! The Resolute vibrated as the electromagnetic pulse launched, streaking toward the enemy fleet. A split second later, Harper sent the decoy signal, drawing the Empire's attention to the opposite direction. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The view screen flared as the EMP exploded, washing over the Imperial ships like a silent tidal wave. Their lights flickered, engines sputtered, and weapons systems went offline. Chaos erupted as the once formidable fleet drifted helplessly. "Direct hit," Lynn reported, unable to hide the satisfaction in her voice. Evelyn didn't smile. "All ships engage. Target their carriers first. Cripple their ability to launch fighters. Harper, jam their communications. I don't want them calling for reinforcements." The Allied fleet surged forward, unleashing a torrent of firepower. Laser cannons and missile salvos tore through the Imperial ships, turning the void into a chaotic storm of destruction. Evelyn's voice rang out over the din of battle, issuing precise orders that kept her fleet coordinated and deadly. "Enemy flagship attempting to reboot systems," Lynn said. "Should we focus fire?" "Negative," Evelyn replied. "Leave them flailing. Focus on their escorts. They're easier to eliminate and will thin their numbers faster." The Resolute weaved through the fray, its shields absorbing glancing hits from the few Imperial ships that managed to regain partial power. Evelyn's mind worked at a blistering pace, calculating trajectories and vulnerabilities. "Commander, incoming transmission from one of their vessels," Harper said. "Put it through." The view screen shifted to show a snarling alien officer, his face twisted with desperation. "Human Commander, this is Captain Vrex of the Imperial Navy. We demand to know your terms for surrender." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Terms?" she echoed, her voice cold. "After what your Empire did to General Grant? You don't get to surrender. You get to burn." She cut the transmission before Vrex could respond. The bridge crew exchanged glances, their respect for her unwavering, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. By the time the battle ended, the Imperial fleet was in ruins. The few ships that managed to retreat were limping, their hulls scarred and broken. Evelyn stood on the bridge, surveying the aftermath. "Casualty report," she said. "Minimal losses on our side," Lynn replied. "We lost 2 frigates, but their crews were evacuated. The Empire lost 29 ships. The rest are either disabled or retreating." Evelyn nodded, but there was no triumph in her expression. This was only the beginning. "Commander," Harper said hesitantly, "we've captured one of their officers alive. He claims to have critical information about their plans." Evelyn's gaze snapped to him. "Bring him to the interrogation room. I'll handle this personally." The captured officer, a pale-skinned alien with an elongated skull and silver eyes, sat shackled in the interrogation room. Evelyn entered, her presence commanding as she loomed over him. "You know who I am?" she asked. The alien nodded slowly. "Commander Evelyn Cross. Your reputation precedes you." "Good," she said, leaning in close. "Then you know what happens if you waste my time. Talk." The alien hesitated, his silver eyes flicking to the guards flanking the room. "Archduke Kael'zar has deployed a weapon. It's unlike anything you've encountered. Its target is your homeworld, Earth." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat, but her expression didn't falter. "Where is it?" "It's en route," the alien said, his voice trembling. "A ship cloaked in Imperial stealth tech. You won't see it coming." Evelyn straightened, her mind racing. "Why tell me this?" The alien's gaze hardened. "Because I know what Kael'zar is capable of. And even I won't serve a monster who seeks to annihilate an entire species." Evelyn studied him for a moment, then turned to her guards. "Lock him up. I'll decide what to do with him later." As she left the room, her thoughts churned. The Empire wasn't just targeting colonies, they were aiming to destroy humanity's heart. Back on the bridge, she addressed her crew. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over. Plot a course for the Imperial capital. We're taking the fight to them." The crew snapped to attention, their resolve unshaken. Evelyn stared out at the stars, her determination burning brighter than ever. The USS Resolute hung in the silence of deep space, its engines thrumming faintly as the fleet regrouped for their boldest move yet. Evelyn Cross stood at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. The crew worked around her with a sharpened focus, the stakes of their mission looming heavy in the air. "Status report," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tension rippling through her. "Fleet is at 87% operational capacity," Commander Lin replied, her fingers gliding across her console. "Repairs are underway on the damaged frigates. All systems are green." "And our destination?" Lieutenant Harper straightened in his seat, his tone tinged with urgency. "We've identified the Empire's Central Command Hub, the capital ship Dominion, currently stationed above their homeworld Kael'Tyr. It's heavily fortified, but intel suggests their primary defenses are geared toward external assaults. A surgical strike could cripple their operations." Evelyn's gaze hardened. "Good. Set course for Kael'Tyr and prepare for stealth maneuvers. I want this fleet running as silent as a ghost." The stars blurred as the Resolute entered warp, the hum of the engines vibrating faintly through the ship. Evelyn retreated to her quarters briefly, the weight of command pressing down on her. Sitting at her desk, she activated a hollow display of Earth, its blue and green surface rotating serenely. She exhaled, her thoughts briefly drifting to her family back home. Her brother's laughter, her mother's warm embrace, they were the fuel that kept her fighting. But she couldn't afford to dwell. Earth's safety depended on her. Hours later, the fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kael'Tyr system. The Empire's homeworld was a stark contrast to Earth, a sprawling expanse of industrialized cities blanketed by storm clouds. The Dominion, a behemoth of a warship, loomed in orbit, its black hull bristling with weaponry and shield generators. Evelyn stood on the bridge, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight. "They won't see us coming," she said, turning to Harper. "Activate cloaking protocols. I want every ship in formation. Maintain silence until my command." The fleet advanced slowly, their engines dampened to avoid detection. As they approached the outer perimeter, Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. One misstep and the Empire's entire armada would be upon them. "Tactical scan of the Dominion," she ordered. Lin's fingers danced over her console. "Scanning. Their shields are strongest around the bridge and power core. Weakest points are along the ventral hangar bay. If we can breach that, we'll have a clear path to disable their engines and weapons systems." "Good," Evelyn said. "Prep the strike teams. We're going in." Minutes later, Evelyn donned her combat armor, the sleek black plating fitting snugly against her body. Her team assembled in the hangar bay, their faces a mix of determination and nerves. "Listen up," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "This is the heart of the Empire. If we take the Dominion, we cripple their command structure and buy Earth the time it needs to prepare. Stick to your training, watch each other's backs, and don't let fear take hold. We're humanity's best chance." A ripple of nods passed through the group as they boarded their shuttles. Evelyn took her place at the helm of the lead craft, her fingers tightening around the controls. The shuttle slipped through the void, cloaked and silent, as the fleet remained poised for backup. As they neared the Dominion, Evelyn felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. "Approaching the ventral hangar," Harper's voice crackled over the comms. "No signs of detection." "Hold steady," Evelyn replied. "Prepare for breach." The shuttles fired synchronized EMP charges at the hangar's shielding, causing a momentary disruption. They slipped inside during the brief window, landing with precision amidst rows of Imperial fighter craft. "Move!" Evelyn barked, leading her team out of the shuttle. They fanned out quickly, their boots silent on the polished metal floor. "Enemy patrol, 10 o'clock," Lin whispered over comms. Evelyn raised a hand, signaling her team to hold position. The patrol, a group of 5 armored Imperials, strode past, oblivious to their presence. Evelyn waited until they turned a corner before giving the all-clear. The team advanced toward the engineering sector, their route mapped to avoid high-traffic zones. They encountered minimal resistance, dispatching the few guards they encountered with swift efficiency. Finally, they reached the reactor core, its massive structure humming with energy. Evelyn gestured for Lin to begin the sabotage. "Give me 2 minutes," Lin said, kneeling by the console and unpacking her tools. "Make it 1," Evelyn replied, her eyes scanning the corridor. The seconds ticked by, each one stretching painfully as Lynn worked. Evelyn's pulse quickened as the faint sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears. "Lynn! Done!" Lynn said, stepping back as the reactor's hum began to falter. "Core destabilizing. They'll lose power in 5 minutes. Time to move," Evelyn ordered. As they made their way toward the command bridge, the Dominion shuddered beneath them. Lights flickered, and alarms blared as the ship's systems began to fail. "We've lost the element of surprise," Lynn said, her voice taut. "Then we'll adapt," Evelyn replied. "Harper, status?" "Imperial forces are scrambling," Harper said over comms. "They're focused on stabilizing the reactor. You have a clear path to the bridge." Evelyn led her team through the twisting corridors, her weapon at the ready. They encountered heavier resistance as they neared the bridge, squads of Imperial soldiers who fought with desperate ferocity. "Push forward!" Evelyn shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She fired in controlled bursts, her shots precise and lethal. Finally, they reached the command bridge, its massive doors sealed shut. Lynn moved to bypass the lock, sweat dripping down her face as she worked under fire. "Got it!" Lynn shouted as the doors slid open. Evelyn stormed inside, her weapon trained on the bridge crew. The Imperials froze, their hands raised in surrender. At the center of the room stood a tall, imposing figure, Archduke Kael'zar himself. "So, the humans bring their defiance to my doorstep," Kael'zar said, his voice calm but laced with disdain. "Bold but foolish." Evelyn stepped forward, her weapon never wavering. "Surrender, Kael'zar. Your fleet is broken, your flagship is failing, and Earth will never bow to you." Kael'zar smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You think this ends with me? The Empire is vast. Even if you kill me, humanity's days are numbered." "Maybe," Evelyn said, her tone icy. "But you won't live to see it." With a single shot, she ended him. The Dominion was in chaos as Evelyn's team extracted. The reactor's destabilization reached critical levels, and explosions rippled through the ship. Back aboard the Resolute, Evelyn watched as the Dominion imploded, a brilliant fireball consuming the Empire's greatest weapon. "Mission accomplished," Harper said, his voice tinged with awe. Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. "This is just the beginning. The Empire will retaliate, but now they know what we're capable of." As the fleet turned toward the safety of Allied space, Evelyn allowed herself a moment of quiet. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had struck a blow that could change the tide. And she would ensure that every sacrifice was worth it.